Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. I don't know about you, but the last 24 hours have been a lot.
Yeah, it's been certainly a historic night, to say the least. I mean, not only do we have Donald Trump returning to the White House
Right.
after a loss in 2020, which, by the way, has not happened since Grover Cleveland
Yeah.
back in 1892.
I didn't realize that.
But think about all the things that he had to overcome to even get to this point.
Right.
2 impeachments, we had 2 assassination attempts,
Yeah.
a criminal conviction, and of course,
It's
the
remarkable.
shadow of January 6th always looms large.
It feels like we've stepped into some kind of alternate timeline.
It does.
And I'm honestly wondering, like, what does all this say about the state of American politics right now?
I think it's a profound shift. And I think it points to something much deeper than just partisan divides.
Okay, so it's November 6th, 2024, the day after the election. The country is, well, divided feels like an understatement at this point. And we're here to try to make sense of it all. We've got expert analyses, news reports, all sorts of perspectives to dive into.
Exactly. And we're not here to take sides or
Yeah.
tell you how to feel about any of this. Our goal is to simply present this information
Right.
as objectively as possible. And we know this is a topic that evokes very strong feelings on both sides.
Absolutely.
But we just want to navigate this new reality
With you.
with you.
Together. So let's just get right to it. What does a second Trump term actually look like? I mean, he's already hinting at a very aggressive agenda, even using the word retribution when
Yeah.
talking about his political opponents.
Yeah, and that's certainly concerning, and it's not just talk. Remember Schedule F, that plan that he introduced during his first term that would allow him to basically replace career civil servants with political appointees?
Oh, yeah, that's the one where he could just stack entire government agencies
Exactly.
with his loyalists.
Exactly. And now he has a much more compliant Senate to work with this time around.
Yeah.
Susan Page over at USA Today pointed out that even if moderates like Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, try to push back,
Right.
he's likely to have enough leverage to get his way this time around.
So what does this mean for actual policies then? What can we expect from Trump 2.0 presidency?
Well, based on his campaign, based on his past actions, we can anticipate some key areas of focus. On the economic front, he's repeatedly mentioned implementing across-the-board tariffs, and he's talked about potentially extending those massive tax cuts from his first term,
Yeah.
further deregulation.
Right. And we know that he's promised to continue that hardline stance on immigration,
Yes.
including those mass deportations he's always talking about.
And of course, there's the Supreme Court. He'll have the opportunity to appoint potentially several new justices, which could have a huge impact on everything from, abortion rights to environmental regulations.
Yeah, he's already floated pardons for those involved in the January 6th insurrection.
Right.
And he's made it very clear that he wants to shut down any federal investigations against himself related to the 2020 election and the classified documents case.
Which, if we're being honest here, raises some serious questions about accountability and the rule of law.
Absolutely.
This isn't just about political differences anymore. This is about the very foundation of our democracy.
And then there's the question of how a second Trump term will impact the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
Several analyses that we've seen are painting a very bleak picture. Using words like shattered and disheartened,
Mm-hmm.
they seem to be struggling with a potential erosion of their core voter base,
Yeah.
particularly among Black and Latino voters.
The collapse of the blue wall in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin is a sign that the political landscape in this country has fundamentally shifted. This isn't just a temporary setback for the Democrats.
Right.
This is a sign that they need to do some serious soul searching about what their party stands for and who it represents.
There's been a lot of criticism of Kamala Harris's campaign strategy, particularly her choice of running mate,
Mm-hmm.
the way she handled progressive policy positions, and just the perception that economic concerns like inflation overshadowed other issues.
Yeah, it's true that midterm elections are historically tough for the party in power, but the scope of this loss suggests that there are some deeper problems at play.
So what do you make of these anxieties surrounding a second Trump presidency? Are they justified?
I think it's important to acknowledge that Trump is an incredibly polarizing figure. He inspires both fervent loyalty and intense opposition, and his policies and his rhetoric have had a profound impact, both domestically and internationally.
All right, well, let's dive into those impacts then. His campaign promises regarding the Russia-Ukraine war suggest a possible shift in U.S. support for Ukraine.
Yeah.
He even hinted at negotiating territorial concessions to Russia,
Yeah.
which has understandably caused considerable alarm amongst his critics who see this as appeasement to Putin. And there's also a lot of uncertainty about what he might do with NATO, given his previous skepticism of the alliance. He's also signaled a potential return to his hardline stance on Iran, a continuation of his strong pro-Israel policies, which could complicate the already fragile situation in the Middle East.
Right.
And we can't forget his stance on China. He's labeled them a strategic competitor. He's got a history of using tariffs as a weapon. It's likely his approach to Taiwan will differ significantly from the Biden administration's. So all of this to say, there's a lot to unpack here, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, it really is a lot. And I think for a lot of people, it's hard not to feel overwhelmed
Right.
by the potential implications of all of this.
Yeah, where do you even begin to wrap your head around all of this?
Yeah.
We talked about these big picture issues.
Right.
But what does a second Trump term actually mean for everyday Americans? Like for you listening right now.
Right. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think the answer really is it depends.
It depends.
It depends on your background.
Sure.
It depends on your values, your economic situation, where you live.
Okay, so let's try to break it down then. Let's say you're someone who's worried about the potential economic fallout of a Trump presidency. What are some specific things that you might want to be paying attention to?
Well, for starters, those tariffs that he keeps talking about.
Right.
If he goes through with those, you could see prices on a lot of everyday goods go up.
Yeah.
You know, think clothes, electronics, even groceries.
And those tax cuts that he's so proud of, those
What?
mostly benefited large corporations and the wealthy.
Uh-huh.
And it's very possible that we could see even further cuts to social programs and services in an effort to offset the impact of those tax cuts.
Absolutely. So if you rely on government programs like Medicare or Social Security, you want to be paying close attention to how things develop.
Right, right. And let's not forget the potential impact on jobs. Trump has been very vocal about deporting undocumented immigrants, which could create, significant disruption in industries that rely on that labor.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about agriculture,
Right.
construction, even the service industry. Those sectors could see major labor shortages, which could then lead to higher prices and even job losses for other workers.
So we're talking about like a ripple effect across the entire economy.
That's right. And all of this against the backdrop of, rising inflation and global economic uncertainty. It's a complex picture
Yeah.
with a lot of potential variables.
And it's not just the economic side of things that people are worried about. Olivia Troy, who served as a national security advisor to Mike Pence, wrote a piece for MSNBC expressing concern about the potential for, increased political violence, threats to the free press, and just this kind of climate of fear and suspicion, particularly surrounding immigration.
Right, and that's a sobering reminder that political rhetoric can have very real consequences. It can shape the way that people treat each other, the way that they see the world.
It's like we're all just teetering on the edge of something, and we don't know which way it's going to go.
Yeah, that uncertainty is definitely fueling a lot of anxiety, and understandably so.
We touched on this earlier, but I'm curious to hear more about the Arab American community's perspective on all this. We know they were disappointed with Kamala Harris, but what are some of their specific concerns about a second Trump term?
Well, it's a mixed bag, to be honest. Trump's record on issues related to Islam in the Middle East is complicated.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have policies like the Muslim ban, which targeted people from several Muslim-majority countries.
Right.
But on the other hand, he's also tried to court Arab American voters by promising to bring peace to the Middle East and even hosting Arab and Muslim leaders at his rallies.
It's a little bit of a tightrope walk for them.
Exactly. And I think a lot of Arab Americans are approaching this with a sense of cautious skepticism. There's a hope that maybe, just maybe, Trump will be different this time around, that he'll actually deliver on some of his promises. But there's also this very deep-seated fear that his rhetoric and his policies could further marginalize and demonize their community.
Right. Ali Harb's piece in Al Jazeera really highlighted that tension. He talked about how some Arab Americans in Dearborn, Michigan, a place with a large Arab population, actually switched their vote from Biden to Trump this time around. They felt disillusioned with the Democrats' unwavering support for Israel and saw Trump as a potential agent of change, someone who might shake things up.
Right. It's a fascinating dynamic, and I think it speaks to the deep sense of frustration and disillusionment that a lot of Arab Americans feel with the current political system.
Yeah, and I think that feeling of disillusionment extends far beyond the Arab American community. I'm seeing it in my own social media feeds, hearing it in conversations with friends and family. There's this pervasive sense that something is deeply wrong, that the system isn't working for everyday people.
And that's the danger, isn't it? When people lose faith in the system, they become much more susceptible to extremism,
Right.
the easy answers to scapegoating.
It feels like we're at a crossroads. We can either give in to that despair, that sense of hopelessness,
Right.
or we can choose to fight for something better.
And that's where I think the conversation needs to shift. We need to move beyond the doom and gloom and start talking about solutions,
Yeah.
about how we can build a more equitable, a more sustainable future.
The perfect segue into something I wanted to ask you about. Zach Beauchamp over at Vox, while acknowledging that a second Trump term poses a serious threat to American democracy, he emphasized that the U.S. is not hungry. We have stronger checks and balances, a more independent judiciary, and a tradition of civic engagement that could potentially act as a bulwark against authoritarianism.
Mhm.
So what does that active citizenship look like in practice?
It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about voting in every election, local and national. It's about supporting organizations that are fighting for the causes you believe in. It's about speaking out against injustice and bigotry, even when it's uncomfortable.
And it's about staying informed, staying engaged, staying connected with your community.
Exactly. It's about remembering that we're not alone in this. We have each other, and that's a
Mhm.
powerful force for change.
It's easy to get lost in all the what-ifs and anxieties surrounding a second Trump presidency.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of unknowns. It's natural to feel uncertain about the future.
But even with all this uncertainty, I think there's still room for hope, and maybe even some opportunities we haven't considered yet.
Oh, I agree. I think sometimes these kinds of shakeups can be catalysts for positive change.
Okay.
It forces us to re-examine, our assumptions, our priorities, our approach to solving problems.
So let's explore that for a bit.
Yeah.
What are some potential opportunities that might actually emerge from a second Trump term? I know it might sound a little counterintuitive right now,
Sure.
but bear with me.
Well, I think one potential silver lining is that it could lead to, a surge in civic engagement. We've already seen a rise in grassroots activism and voter turnout in recent years, and this election could be a wake-up call for a lot of people who maybe had become complacent.
Right, like a renewed sense of urgency to protect the values and institutions that they hold dear.
Exactly. And that kind of energy can translate into real change. It can lead to new movements, new organizations, new leaders who are committed to creating a more just and equitable society.
It's like that saying, sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can start to rebuild.
Right. And let's not forget the potential for change within the Democratic Party itself. They've been criticized for being out of touch with the needs and concerns of working class Americans.
Yeah.
This election could force them to kind of reassess their priorities and reconnect with their base.
Like a much needed course correction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bhaskar Sankara, in his piece for The Guardian, he argued that the Democrats need to return to their economic populist roots. Think back to the New Deal era. He believes they need to offer a clear and compelling vision for a more just and equitable society, one that really addresses the economic anxieties that have fueled Trump's rise.
Right. It's about understanding and responding to the very real struggles that people are facing in their daily lives.
Absolutely. And remember, the pendulum always swings. Even in the face of setbacks, progress is rarely linear.
We also can't overlook the importance of, the free press and the independent judiciary. These institutions play a vital role in holding power to account and protecting democratic norms.
Absolutely. They're essential for a functioning democracy. A free and independent press can shine a light on corruption, can challenge disinformation, can hold those in power accountable. And an independent judiciary ensures that the rule of law is upheld, even when it's inconvenient for those in power.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we do have safeguards in place, mechanisms to push back against abuses of power.
And those safeguards are only as strong as the people who defend them.
Right.
That's why it's so important for each of us to stay engaged, to stay informed, and to speak out against injustice.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway that you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important message is this. A second Trump term presents undeniable challenges, but it's not the end of the story. It's not a foregone conclusion that everything will fall apart. The future is still being written, and we all have a role to play in shaping it.
It's a call to action, to stay engaged, to stay hopeful, to never stop believing in the possibility of a better future.
Exactly. It's about remembering that we have agency, that our actions, both individually and collectively, can make a difference.
So to you listening, we encourage you to take some time to reflect on everything we've discussed today. Think about what resonates with you, what sparks your curiosity, what ignites a fire within you to make a difference.
Absolutely. Whether it's volunteering your time, donating to a cause you believe in, or simply having thoughtful conversations with people who hold different viewpoints, every action counts.
Let's not give in to despair or apathy. Let's channel our energy into positive action and work together to build a brighter future.
The road ahead may be uncertain, but it's a journey that we must take together.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.